never liked driving in the snow, especially at night. The way the wind howled across the empty highway and the way the snow swallowed everything beyond the reach of my headlights, it made me feel like I was the only person left in the world. That night, I wished I was. I was cutting through a long stretch of back roads, the kind where radio signals vanish, and the only company you have is the sound of your tires crunching over ice. The snowstorm had picked up, thick flakes swirling in the wind, making it harder to see beyond a few feet. It was just past midnight, and my gas gauge was dipping lower than I was comfortable with. When I saw an old gas station up ahead, its flickering neon sign barely visible through the thick snowfall, I figured I'd stop and fill up. The place looked abandoned. The lot was buried under untouched snow, no fresh tire tracks or footprints anywhere. But the sign glowed open, and the door was slightly ajar, swinging gently in the wind. I should have just kept driving. I stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed was the silence. Thick, suffocating, absolute. The air smelled stale, like dust and something else I couldn't place. The shelves were still stocked, but everything looked like it had been sitting for years. A thin layer of frost clung to the glass refrigerators in the back, their contents barely visible behind the frostbitten doors. The only source of light was a buzzing fluorescent bulb hanging above the counter, flickering intermittently, casting long, jittery shadows across the store. I walked toward the counter. There was an old bell sitting on top, so I tapped it lightly. The sound echoed through the store, too loud for a place so small. No one came. I tapped it again. Still nothing. That's when I heard it. The faintest shuffle of footsteps from somewhere in the aisles. Slow. Deliberate. Like someone was moving just enough to let me know they were there. Hello? My voice barely carried. No response. I turned, scanning the rows of shelves, but the dim, flickering light made it impossible to see anything clearly. My pulse hammered in my ears. I didn't want to be there anymore. The oppressive silence pressed in around me, thick as the snow outside. I turned back toward the counter, ready to leave, but something had changed. The register was open now, though I never heard it move. And beside it, resting perfectly in the center of the counter, was a single wet footprint. Not mine. The air felt heavier, pressing down on my chest like something unseen was standing right behind me. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just turned and walked, steady, controlled, toward the door. The second my foot crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me with a force that rattled the glass. I ran to my car, breath fogging up in the freezing air. The gas pump's handle was still in my tank, but I didn't care. I yanked it out and threw myself into the driver's seat, locking the doors in one motion. My headlights flickered as I turned the key, and for a split second I saw it in the rearview mirror, a figure standing just inside the gas station's doorway. Motionless, watching. The engine roared to life and I peeled out of the lot, the snow kicking up behind me. I didn't look back again. I didn't stop until I saw streetlights and buildings, until I was sure I was far, far away. The next morning, I checked the map. That stretch of road had no gas stations, not for miles. And when I checked my gas tank, it was full. For days after, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had escaped something I wasn't meant to. That night still lingers in my mind. The way the store felt untouched by time, the silence that wasn't empty, the wet footprint that wasn't mine, and worst of all, the shadowy figure that, even now, I feel might still be watching. I never should have taken the shortcut through the old mountain road, but the highway was jammed due to an accident, and the detour added hours to my drive. The road was narrow, winding, barely maintained, and completely blanketed in snow. My tires struggled for traction, and the further I went, the more I regretted my decision. Then I saw it. A figure in the distance, barely visible in the swirling snow. It stood near the tree line, motionless, watching. At first, I thought it might be a stranded driver, but something about the stillness sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the cold. As I got closer, my headlights washed over it. It was a woman, pale, almost colorless. Her dress was tattered, old-fashioned, and thin enough that she should have been freezing. But she didn't shiver, she didn't move at all. Just as I passed, she turned her head sharply to face me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. My stomach clenched. I pressed the gas, my car skidding slightly on the icy road. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, she was gone. not walking away, not fading into the blizzard, just gone. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I needed to get off this road, but the more I drove, the worse things got. Shapes lurked in my periphery, figures standing just at the edge of my vision, vanishing when I turned my head. The storm grew heavier, the road barely visible. Then, the worst part. I saw headlights ahead, finally, relief flooding me. Another car. I wasn't alone. But as the lights neared, a sense of wrongness took hold. They were too high, too bright, and as they passed, my blood turned to ice. It wasn't a car, it was my car. Identical. Same make, same model, same color, and behind the wheel was me. I barely had time to process it before my own reflection in the other car snapped its head toward me. Its eyes were hollow, its mouth stretched into a soundless scream. The car vanished into the blizzard behind me, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I pushed forward until I saw the glow of a gas station up ahead. The lights were warm, welcoming. I pulled in, parked, and just sat there, gripping the wheel, trying to convince myself I hadn't lost my mind. The clerk inside looked surprised when I stumbled in. "You all right?" he asked. "Yeah," I lied. I took the old road." His expression changed. "That road's been closed for years." I turned to look out the window. Snow fell heavily, but I could still see my tire tracks. Or at least I should have. But the road behind me was untouched, pristine, as if I had never been there at all. It was one of those bone-chilling winter nights where the cold seemed to sink right through your clothes, no matter how many layers you wore. The wind howled through the trees, and the snow fell in thick sheets, coating everything in a layer of white. I'd been working late at the office, and by the time I left, it was well past midnight. The roads were nearly deserted, the kind of quiet that only comes with a heavy snowstorm in the dead of night. I should have known better than to take the back roads. I wasn't far from home, but the thought of getting caught in the snowstorm made me take a shortcut through a neighborhood I rarely used. It was more isolated, but I didn't mind the peace and solitude. It wasn't long before I realized how bad the roads were, slick with ice and snow that hadn't been cleared. My car slid on the slippery surface, and every time I tried to accelerate, I could feel the wheels spinning in place. I slowed down, trying to stay calm, but the headlights flickered. I cursed under my breath, but when they came back on, I saw something in the distance, a figure standing by the side of the road. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but as I got closer, it became clear there was definitely someone out there, just standing in the snow. I slowed even more, unsure if I should stop. It wasn't common to see people walking out here, especially at this hour in a snowstorm. I pulled up alongside them, my window still rolled up, but the person didn't move. They just stared at my car. I rolled down the window a crack. "You need help?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the howling wind. The figure didn't respond. They didn't even blink. Something about their stillness unnerved me. I was about to roll up the window and drive away when they finally spoke. "Get out of the car," they whispered, their voice so faint I could hardly hear it over the wind. But the words sent a shiver through me. I hesitated. My gut was telling me to drive off, but I couldn't bring myself to just leave. I thought about how isolated this area was, how long it would take for anyone to pass by. Something about that nagging feeling made me stay. I unlocked the door slowly, stepping out into the snow. The cold immediately hit me, making my breath visible in the freezing air. The figure was still standing there, motionless, staring at me. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt. The figure's eyes shifted slightly, but there was no real expression, just an emptiness that seemed to pull at something deep inside me. "You should leave," they said. "Now." My heart skipped a beat. The urgency in their voice made my blood run cold, and I instinctively took a step back, reaching for the door. But just as I moved, I heard a soft crunching noise behind me. I spun around, my pulse quickening. The snow was undisturbed, the road stretching out in front of me with nothing but the wind howling. There was nothing there. The figure was gone. I looked left, right, but there was nothing but the endless expanse of snow. My car felt miles away. I bolted back toward it, slamming the door shut behind me. I fumbled with the keys, heart pounding as the engine finally roared to life. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see nothing. But there, Just at the edge of the light's reach, standing by the side of the road, was the figure once more, unmoving. I didn't stop to think. My foot slammed the gas pedal, and I drove faster than I should have, my hands gripping the wheels so tight I thought they might break. The snow blurred around me, but all I could think about was that person, that strange, cold figure who had never moved, who had warned me to leave. I didn't look back again. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my nerves were shot. The lights flickered on in the house, and I rushed inside, locking the door behind me. I stood in the warmth of my living room, trying to shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, even though I was. I couldn't explain what happened, but I knew this. I would never take that road again. And something about the way the figure's eyes never seemed to blink stayed with me, deep in my mind, long after the storm passed.